Book of Job, chapter 37. At this also my heart is troubled, and moved out of its place. Hear thou a report by the anger of the Lord's wrath, and a discourse shall come out of his mouth. His dominion is under the whole heaven, and his light is at the extremities of the earth. After him shall be a cry with a loud voice. He shall thunder with the voice of his excellency. Yet he shall not cause men to pass away, for one shall hear his voice. The mighty one shall thunder wonderfully with his voice, for he has done great things which we knew not, commanding the snow, be thou upon the earth, and the stormy rain, and the storm of the showers of his might. He seals up the hand of every man, that every man may know his own weakness. And the wild beasts come in under the covert, and rest in their lair. Troubles come on out of the secret chambers, and cold from the mountain tops. And from the breath of the mighty one he will send frost, and he guides the water in whatever way he pleases. And if a cloud obscures what is precious to him, his light will disperse the cloud. And he will carry round the encircling clouds by his governance, to perform their works, whatsoever he shall command them. This has been appointed by him on the earth, whether for correction, or for his land, or if he shall find him an object for mercy. Hearken to this, O Job. Stand still, and be admonished of the power of the Lord. We know that God has disposed his works, having made light out of darkness. And he knows the divisions of the clouds, and the signal overthrows of the ungodly. But thy robe is warm, and there is quiet upon the land. Wilt thou establish with him foundations for the ancient heavens? They are strong as a molten mirror. Wherefore, teach me. What shall we say to him? And let us cease from saying much. Have I a book, or a scribe by me, that I may stand and put man to silence? But the light is not visible to all. It shines afar off in the heavens, as that which is from him in the clouds. From the north come the clouds, shining like gold. In these great are the glory and honor of the Almighty. And we do not find another his equal in strength. As for him that judges justly, dost thou not think that he listens? Wherefore, men shall fear him, and the wise also in heart shall fear him. Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum. Welcome to Job chapter 37, which there are 24 verses. So we start in verse 2. It reads, Hear thou a report by the anger of the Lord's wrath, and a discourse shall come out of his mouth. What is this talking about? Why is all of a sudden anger? Well, if we remember that the scriptures are not divided by chapters, these are man-made. This was one scroll. And so we're actually picking up off from where chapter 36 left off, where it talks about there is a portion for the unrighteous. So this is describing in more detail what that is. It is a report by the anger of the Lord's wrath. So he is angry at the unrighteous. It's not that he's angry at Job. And a discourse shall come out of his mouth. Again, reserved for the unrighteous. Verses, hear attentively the noise of his voice and the sound that goes out of his mouth. So he's describing the weather phenomena and connecting it to the voice of Elohim in the Masoretic. Verse 3, his dominion is under the whole heaven. Verses, he directs it under the whole heaven. So it's talking about his rule. His domain that he rules is under all of heaven. Versus his voice is guided and it moves under the whole heaven. His light at the extremities of the earth. So this is talking about Elohim's own light, or perhaps the light that he creates, not specifically or limited to lightning alone. Lightning bolts seem to be described in the Masoretic, that they stretch out to the ends of the earth, or that they are spread out throughout the earth. Verse 4, after him shall be a cry with a loud voice, after it a voice roareth. So in Revelation, there's an angel's voice announcing the coming of the Messiah and of Elohim. But this seems to be describing Elohim's own voice. After him shall be a cry, which is a loud voice, with a voice. So it follows him, or it is his voice, because it seems to be his voice. Why I say this is because the second half of the verse says, he shall thunder with the voice of his excellency. Unless these are two distinct voices, two distinct cries. The cry announcing him, like a trumpet announcing his coming, and then his own voice, which is thunder. So two different possibilities there. Verses talking about thunder, he's referring to the thunder, the sound of thunder that follows a flash of lightning. He shall thunder with the voice of his excellency, versus he thunders with the voice of his excellency. What's the difference there? Oh, he shall thunder. Okay, so I think the difference is, if it's he shall, then that's referring to something future. That could be revelation, like prophetic language. This could be eschatological, talking about the end times, versus simply Elohim's voice is like thunder in general, not referring to a distant time period in the future. Yet he shall not cause men to pass away, for one shall hear his voice. This isn't talking about Elohim granting everyone eternal life and no one will ever die again. We're all going to be vampires. That's not what it's talking about. This is referring to when you hear his voice, you won't die right away. You'll be afraid. This could be a reference to the Exodus 20 account, where Elohim's voice was heard by the people of Israel, and they lived to tell. Yes, they were terrified. They even asked Moses, don't let him speak to us. This is too much. They were overwhelmed with fear. Which is interesting because Job seems to be a contemporary, or at least not a contemporary, but his life seems to take place after the Exodus, because he seemed to have lived either during the time of Joseph or during the time of Moses. So he could be contemporary, actually. Yeah, so I kind of take that back. He could be contemporary of. So this could be a prophecy of what the Israelites were going to experience at Mount Sinai. That's really interesting. That is a very interesting possibility. Versus, he will not stay with them when his voice is heard. So he won't be present when they hear his voice. So this could be prophetic. Prophetic of Exodus 20, since it seems that Job lived around or before that event. Because if it's true, according to the Jasher and Talmud, then he was alive at the same time as Moses. But it's interesting to find the timelines and try to make sense of when did Job live, because some say he lived during the time of Abraham, but then if you look at the Septuagint, it actually backs up a little bit of Jasher in the Talmud, saying he indeed is a descendant of Esau. Like I believe a grandson of Esau, if I'm not mistaken. He's a king of Edom. So that would make him, since Esau is the brother of Jacob, who was renamed Israel, that would make him similar to either a Joseph or a Manasseh, in terms of, if we're comparing family tree to family tree. Okay, so that's that. Verse 5, the mighty one shall thunder wonderfully with his voice. Thunders marvelously with his voice. Again, the shall, that's really up to the translator. It's not given whether it's past tense, present, or future. But if it is indeed future and it's correct, then this is basically Elihu saying he's coming soon to speak with you, that is, Job. Or maybe it's talking about Revelation, but in the immediate context of this chapter in this book, Elohim will speak to Job. He shall thunder with his voice to you. You're going to hear him very soon. In the very next chapter, that is, chapter 38, Elohim is going to enter the picture. Spoiler alert. Verse 7. Actually, I think you're supposed to say spoiler alert before we spoil it. So anyway, for verse 7. He seals up the hand of every man, that every man may know his own weakness. Versus, he seals up the hand of every man, that all men may know his work. So what's the difference there? In the Septuagint, Elohim is limiting man's power. Why? That we may recognize just how powerless and limited we are. So sealing up the hand is restricting our ability to either work or to do what we are aspiring to do, to accomplish. Think of the Tower of Babel, for instance. How Elohim confused man, introduced languages, versus Elohim limiting man's power. Why? That we would recognize his work. That doesn't make much sense personally to me anyway. I believe that we would recognize Elohim's work more if we were completely dependent upon him and we had zero power. For example, if he causes a snowstorm and then, the tanks just are dead in their tracks, we recognize his hand. It is true, yes, one can recognize Elohim's power when we are at the end of our power, when we've reached the limit of our capabilities, for instance, yet one can remain blind to Elohim and even his creation, his existence, if man is limited to developing an industrial society, as we see in the West, that has been largely restricted to achieving only so much within that framework, within that system, or that structure. It would make more sense, for me anyway, to say that man knows his work. He knows Elohim's work, that is, when he turns our work into nothing. He just turns it upside down. He's just completely obliterates it. Think of the Titanic. Think of great natural disasters, as they call them, like Pompeii. And we call them natural disasters, but how many of them are actually Elohim's hand behind the scenes? moving ahead his plan, orchestrating and writing his story, fulfilling his story that he has written since the beginning of time. Verse 9, troubles come on out of the secret chambers. That is a cryptic saying. I'm not sure what troubles are and where those secret chambers are. I don't claim to understand what this means. I don't know. Let's leave it at that. Out of the south comes the whirlwind. So those are, just want to point out these are different. Not going to say anything clever. They're different, clearly. Cold from the mountaintops. Cold out of the north. So more specific in the Septuagint. And the focus as well on trouble rather than whirlwind. A whirlwind. And secret chambers rather than the south. From the southernmost direction. From the south. Okay, let's leave it at the south. He guides the water in whatever way he pleases. And the breadth of the waters is straitened, so it's constrained. It may not even be flowing, but it is limited to a certain boundary. So he's guiding the movement of the waters versus restricting its movement. And what came to my mind when I read this was Mashiach. Yeshua spoke to the weather. He said, "Be still," to the wind. And when he was walking on the water, he could guide it and make it do whatever he wanted. So, yes, it was stormy, but he walked on top of the waves. He walked not on still water, on stormy waters. He can make them do whatever he pleases. It was even said by his disciples, what manner of man is this, that the elements listen to him. Verse 11, if a cloud obscures what is precious to him, his light will disperse the cloud. Also by watering he wearies the thick cloud, or wearies. He scatters his bright cloud. So it's talking about one cloud in the Septuagint. This cloud is blocking what is precious to him, whatever that is, I don't know. And he acts on behalf of his precious, the apple of his eye, whatever this is, the special object of his affection, and the clouds move over for him. He disperses it. He's moving the cloud himself, dispersing it, shooing it. Versus he wears out thick clouds by adding more water. That doesn't seem to make sense because usually that makes the cloud bigger, I would imagine. Clouds are made of water droplets, as we learned in our previous video, or as I mentioned, and scatters a bright cloud. So he's scattering a bright cloud and he's wearing out another cloud. So the Masoretic is portraying Elohim. I'm not trying to be facetious here, but he's portrayed as one that does not seem to like these clouds, these particular clouds, which seems to be a bit of a contradiction since he is described as the one who rides in a cloud, like a chariot. He only moves the clouds that get in the way of what he calls his precious, or not like Golem, I mean, my precious. No, what is precious? Clouds that get in the way of what is precious to him. This cloud could be symbolic of something else, perhaps. I'm not sure. Skipping ahead to verse 14. Just want to review that just to make sure. Yeah, 14. Hearken to this, O Job, stand still and be admonished. So that means be warned or be taught of what? The power of the Lord versus consider the wondrous works of Elohim. So he's saying to Job in the Masoretic, just consider the works, everything I've talked about, versus the Septuagint saying, listen to this, Job, stand still and be warned or be taught. It seems to be he's teaching him and also warning him at the end, but It's more of a teaching because he goes into detail, as we will see in the next verses. We know that Elohim is disposed. It should be big G. He's arranged or ordered his works, his creation, making light out of darkness. Do you know when Elohim disposed them, when he arranged them and caused the light of his cloud to shine? So one's a fact, presented as a fact versus a question. This could also be a question. It could be, do we know? How? So I'm open to both because, again, the translators use their discernment to say, okay, this should be a question mark or this should not. This should be an exclamation mark. This should not. This should be parenthetical. This should not. Verse 16, he knows the divisions of the clouds versus do you know the balancing of the clouds? Again, a fact versus a question. The signal overthrows of the ungodly. What does that mean? We'll go into that later. The wondrous works of him, which is perfect in knowledge. That's verse 16. Elihu is essentially asking Job in the Septuagint, if you don't understand how Elohim manages something as simple as a cloud or a bow, he decides, for instance, to strike down the wicked with these weather phenomena. You don't understand how this happens or why it happens. How can you demand an explanation from Elohim regarding your own suffering? It's like an ant asking a giant, oh, help me, I need an explanation from you. It is a call to humility, a reminder that Elohim's perspective is infinitely wider than our own. We don't see the big picture. That is actually a good perspective that Elihu is framing for Job. It's a good preparation for what's about to happen in the next chapter. Verses, do you know Elohim's works? Simple enough. Verse 17, but thy robe is warm, there's quiet upon the land, versus how thy garments are warm because of the south wind, essentially. So, in other words, Elohim controls the warmth of Job's clothes by relation to the weather that he causes, whether it's warm, hot, cold, and even controls whether there be war or peace. He moves the leaders, the rulers, to go into a season of fighting or decide to get along. Versus Job's clothes are warmed by the south wind. I've said that already. Let's move ahead to verse 19, wherefore teach me. So teach me, what shall we say to Elohim? So this is personally a memory verse of mine in the Masoretic. We cannot order our speech by reason of darkness. It seems like such a poetic, lovely, very lovely prose. If we can say it's like a line of poetry, it's so lovely just to look at it and to speak these words. But it simply isn't so. It doesn't say that in the original text. It says correctly, let us cease from saying much. Job, we have to just stop talking. We're going to slip up. Verses, we cannot order our speech by reason of darkness. What is he saying, the Masoretic? We can't speak, Job. Why? Because we're ignorant. That's also true. It just doesn't say that in the original text. In the Septuagint, the older text, let's put it that way, the older text. Verse 20, have I a book or a scribe by me? Shall it be told him that I speak? So who's going to relay to Elohim that I'm speaking? But in the Septuagint, he's saying, do I have a book? Is someone transcribing all my words? Well, I mean, technically not at that time, but it's literally in the book. I'm reading it right now. It's kind of interesting, that comment he made. That I may stand and put man to silence. Which man? That's actually, I don't even know what he's talking about here. If a man speak, surely he shall be swallowed up. So he's saying we shouldn't keep talking. And will Elohim be told if I'm talking? And if I talk, if any man talks, he's going to be swallowed up. It sounds like a very scary God. In the Septuagint, it's not described that way. He's basically saying we should stop talking. Do I have a scribe or a book? Is he writing what I'm saying? That I may stand and put man to silence. Who is the man? Is it Job? Can't. That's a cryptic saying. I'm just going to write it here and say cryptic and mysterious. I do not know what this means. Comment below. What do you think that means? I don't know what that means. I'm going to look it up. Just so I'm sorry, I had to use AI. It is cryptic. But this seems to make sense that Elihu is saying, I don't have a secret book of wisdom. I'm not a divine scribe. I'm just a man. So Elihu seems to be admitting he's a man. I don't know if that's exactly right, but it makes sense to me anyway. If even I, who is defending Elohim, can't find the words to stand before him, like in the court of law, divine court of law, how can you, Job, think you can challenge him? I think he's more referring to how, if he can't keep Job silent by everything he said already, then who would be able to? So it's interesting that it's connected to the next chapter, because immediately after these words, well, not immediately, but very soon, this is where Elohim will speak out of the whirlwind. So let's go back to our chapter here. Verse 21, but the light is not visible to all. It shines afar off in the heavens. Verses as that which is, and then it says, from him in the clouds. So this light comes from Elohim in the clouds by reason of him creating the light. And then it says in the Masoretic, cleanses them. I'm not sure if it's cleansing the men or the clouds, the wind that is passing by. Verse 22, from the north come the clouds shining like gold. Versus fair weather cometh out of the north. Actually, I looked this up. Fair weather comes not exactly from the south, but the southwest, if we're going to be really technical about it and a little nitpicky. From the north comes cold, dry air from the polar, Arctic, maritime, resulting in cool to freezing temperatures, clear skies, sometimes snow, especially in winter. But if we're talking about good weather, fair weather, the most pleasant weather comes from the southwest. Okay, and these great, continuing on in the Septuagint, in these great, and we know from our previous video, great, or one of our previous videos where I talk about in the footnote video, great is actually poly. In the Greek, it's poly. So this isn't talking about great. This is better defined as many or multitude or much. So in these multitudes, talking about the clouds shining like gold, are the glory and honor of the Almighty. It's not the exact glory and honor. It's like a similitude. It's like a preview of what his glory and honor is like a representative on earth of what his glory is like a gold light, shining, clouds shining like gold, those kind of clouds, or that kind of light that is reflected in the clouds. Verses with Eloah is, and this is actually amazing, not terrifying, not disgusting, like the modern vernacular has twisted this word. It's actually amazing majesty. And we do not find another his equal in strength. Straightforward, simple to understand. Versus touching the Almighty, we cannot find him out. We can't know him. We can't find him or find out about him. He is excellent in power. We have a significant difference. I think our first one, and even potentially a big difference in this chapter. It reads, as for him that judges justly, dost thou not think that he listens? Don't you think he listens, Job? I don't think Job, so far what we've read is the answer is no. I don't think, if I'm Job at this point, looking from the Septuagint perspective, from this narrative, I don't think he believes that Elohim's listening. He does believe that he has an advocate in heaven, so I'm not sure how that relates to whether Elohim is listening or not. Maybe the advocate is listening, but maybe not the judge yet. Not yet, because I don't think he's convinced that Elohim hears or even listens, or not listens, but will speak to him, will give him the audience to speak face to face with him, or at least voice to voice, voice to ear. On the other hand, we have Elohim is excellent in judgment and in plenty of justice. He will not afflict. So it's pretty straightforward. I don't even need to explain the difference there. He judges justly versus don't you think that he listens, versus he's excellent in judgment and plenty of justice. He will not afflict. So why is that? That is a big difference, because isn't he not afflicting Job technically via Satan? He's being afflicted. So that is a contradiction. I'm going to call it out. It's a contradiction, folks. Sorry for all caps. It was an accident. But verse 24, last verse of the chapter. Wherefore, or therefore, men shall fear him, and the wise also in heart shall fear him. The end. That's the end of Elihu's words in the Septuagint. Verses, he respects not any that are wise of heart. That is a contradiction too. He does respect those wise of heart. Like, he respects them in the sense of that there is a respect there. Not that he shows partiality to anybody, but just doesn't say that in the Septuagint. So that's all for this chapter. Thank you very much for your time. The next video is very big. That's where Elohim enters the picture and enters Job. So thank you very much for your time. Till next time, I bid you all shalom aleichem, assalamu alaikum, irini mazisu, pax vobiscum, peace be unto you, and maranatha.